Seems like massive disappearance.
Do you need a dollar extra paper?
You want paper?
Yes. How much would you like? You want gigantic paper? Yeah.
Oh my god, that's huge.
I was like, no. Oh. Bradley Manning!
Oh, that was the Dallas' issue.
Oh, yeah, Dallas.
Do you remember when Dallas got in the fight with Chuck?
That was like,
That was the best fight ever.
you remember when he was forced out of the track?
Yeah. No, you shut up. No, you shut up. No, Dallas.
Oh, Dallas. So excited.
Alright, ready.
The African should recognize the small guys in the United States.
Fuck, we dodged the big cars. What do you think?
I'm very disappointed that
You should recognize small events and meetings.
Don't talk to me about my Ben Carson app after this round. It's legit.
We do.
It's the only good Ben Carson app in the circuit here.
Shit, no.
No. No, it's queer Mormonism.
Okay.
Fun stuff. We will have to yell about that after this debate.
His cousin's like 24.
Alright, we all hearing?
Contention, what is neo-colonialism? The ace of what is the African Union status quo policies operate through a neoliberal position. Neo-colonial policies, the first started with 77% of the funds the African Union seeks are from the United States, United Kingdom, France, Canada, Sweden, Switzerland, and other European countries. The ace of what that this allows the United States and others to explore normative legal practices like enforcing democratic constitutionalism to African countries. The reason what the World Bank and the European Union also contribute a massive amount of neoliberal position. They ensure that certain structural adjustment programs get implemented to ensure that the resistance to global forms of commodification are possible because they rely on the International Monetary Fund and other international financial institutions to be able to give them the funding that they need to be able to become a quote-unquote legitimate state. The second half is the foreign aid. The aid supported that $28 billion of countries have been given foreign aid by Western countries in order to make sure that nations are beholden to Western powers. Means that 86% of the products, capital, and raw and finished materials are all exported outside of the continent of Africa to more quote-unquote developed continents that allow them to be able to use in other places. This results in a kind of finite cycle, an infinite cycle of where resources are exported from Africa are produced into something else and then resold at extremely higher prices that disproportionately affect developing countries. In that way, the third is neoliberal only operates within a framework. Neoliberalism is what that calls for the state to be ignored as the calls for the state's independence to be ignored is based on the resistant modes, the alternate form of governance within civilian and the status quo. They rely on a radical democratic opposition, the way in which the neoliberal position allows them to have these that neoliberal seeks a safe, not a safe space, but rather a smooth space that allows for individuals to be able to have a single form of international governance that allows for neoliberal institutions to be able to go from one country to another that have the same kind of loopholes to be able to explore inside their economic institutions with why constitutional democracy gets interpreted to allow for corporate personhood in the United States in order to enforce that in other countries to make sure that they get access to the same kind of protections that prevent them from being sued for liability. The court arguments that this is rooted in the era of coloniality. The country was divided by European powers in order to be able to allow for land acquisition resources. This ultimately in the entire continent a form of commodity in favor of usage reduction process. The reason was that this generalization allowed for the entire reduction of the African continent to be one thing that allowed for the African Union, the Union of African Organization States, to be formed later that a supranational government could possibly represent the entire diversity of the continent, was an indication that these different countries, different cultures, and thousands of different languages have all been determined by the discipline that this also implicates all of the status quo of politics right now. The discipline that the languages spoken in South America, Africa, and all over the world have been enforced by the International Monetary Fund to have to learn English, otherwise not considered as an economically productive state. This enforces a kind of cultural linguistic imperialism upon other countries, whereby we force them to be kind of obeyed because they're not considered independent or considered developed enough to be rendered proper status within the international community legalism. The reason point is the impacts. The first argument is evidence and votation. The ace point is that the desire for endless resource acquisition is fantasy of neoliberalism that relies on a short-term understanding about an endless present, whereby we constantly spend our resources in order to develop products that less a cycle of profitability that never actually results in any kind of sustainability, because only the decisions are made based on whether or not they benefit the corporation, the peace points, resource wars. The endless destruction of the environment only means that we will eventually use up all of the oil, we use up all of the environment without caring about it. This makes an international conflict over whether or not these resources actually exist, or will we be able to be accessed, well, inevitably because they are limited and finite. This means that countries launch nuclear weapons because their countries are already starving, means that they are not able to check by things like mutually assured destruction, their fantasy of United States hegemony. These cease point is environmental destruction ultimately results in the extinction of all life on Earth, because Earth life needs to stay Earth life. Whenever we destroy the environments and destroy the way in which those environments operate in order for the sake of profit, that means that we can justify this endless destruction of these kind of things. Why global coal is so dominant yet so dirty? It's a way in which that is always implemented is through things like mountaintop removal mining that are incredibly environmentally destructive, but we don't care because it's cheaper. These points that ultimately makes extinction inevitable, because as long as we do things like coal, it ultimately results in warming, that increase the global temperature, allows for things like the rise of the sea, that makes it impossible for and temperatures make it impossible to have food production. The point is commodification in a system of neocolonialism. All populations can be quantified based on the need for corporations to be dominant within the global market. Second argument is error replication. The ace of points that neoliberalism operates on a flawed developmental theory that assumes that export-oriented processes are the only way to more international engagement to be able to be valuable. This piece points that this leads to a privatization of corporation power. You can look to Jamaica as a perfect example of this, whereby we forced them to have a specific kind of economic process where they exported all of their dairy, but then in the future the United States would force them to export that. They would produce it locally, but then they also require them to eliminate kind of protectionist policies that protected from the United States subsidies, but that ultimately went away with IMF funds that allowed for the United States to produce a whole bunch of like a powder to dairy milk that crush those local development economies that allows them to be able to sustain their resistance to these point. Thus, we advocate an interrogation of the historical forces which fail to recognize Somaliland's independence. We advocate an interrogation of the historical forces which fails to recognize Somaliland independence. It's in the middle of my paper, so I can't tear it up and give it to you, but I'll write for you in the process. The first argument is that we need colonialism, a colonial critique of history. This is key to reform, and this is key to reform our understanding of what it means to be independent, which means that what it means to be a state. The establishment of statehood has empirically been used to implement neoliberal and neocolonial policies, because in order for them to be given international status as a state, that means that they have to adopt international policies. The second argument is history is key. The lack of empirical understanding why these particular policies were implemented by the Eurocentric powers of colonialism means that we never understand the current politics of today. The third argument is debate. Key deliberation is key to avoid the imposition of neoliberal domination, because we ask the question why neoliberalism is a good theory in the first place, rather than presuming that market integration is necessarily positive. The fourth argument is the question of the debate of why they are not recognizing the status quo opposing government, their oppositional government framework that ultimately exists. Neoliberalism is rather than being recognized by the international community because they refuse foreign aid by other countries, and they also refuse the African Union's attempt to bring them into the fold of contemporary politics. Context 2 is framework. The Institute's role about is to criticize the production and maintenance of coloniality. The role about is to criticize the production and maintenance of coloniality. The Institute's coloniality, dominating politics and status quo. The first argument is slavery. The imposition of slavery upon populations ultimately led to degradation. The ability to have inclusive politics anywhere in the world because those populations, the persons of color, specifically been deemed a dissident. A result that they had to fight for literally their recognition for decades. Second argument is agricultural subsidies are the only way in which populations are able to survive because you absolutely need food, but we subjugate those to an international export-oriented markets whereby they say they're not able to have access to food security as opposed to food sovereignty, which makes it impossible. The third is linguistic domination. I've already made that argument. The season one debate is key. The eighth point is the first argument debate is a kind of binary of in and out of the room questions. We need to reform that question in debate whether or not things will happen inside or outside of the room, but rather realize that the real implications of the PMC have things that apply both in and out of the room at the same time. The second argument balance functions of choice. We have the ability to be able to make a choice in this debate between neo-colonial and neoliberal imposition and actually recognize small and independent.
Yeah, I'm starting context. Can you repeat your role about one more time?
Yes. The role of audit is to criticize the production and maintenance of coloniality.
You need to write that up.
Okay, and I need a copy. Okay, and so does your advocacy, are you advocating for the eventual recognition of Somaliland? I know that you're looking at history, but would you contend that Somaliland should be recognized?
We say that they're independent already. The international community is just not recognizing them as an official.
Oh, okay, so you are advocating, yes, for their independence.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. Okay, and so your entire series about you talk about colonialism and neoliberalism are one another, like how they intersect within one another. And how do you solve this with your advocacy of just interrogating history? How does interrogating history?
Sure. So empirically, theory and especially you're right. Empirically, theory has been used to theorize about how the state operates in order to impose these kinds of different policies upon populations, but there's rarely a historical interrogation of how neoliberalism uses neocolonialism to create these spaces that allows them to be able to subject
how does an interrogation of history as your method?
Right, so the genealogical interrogation, the critique that we provide in the PMC is one that interrogates the way in which history has allowed for neocolonialism to be used as neoliberal policies. Interrogating that allows us to understand how structures of politics work to oppress people today. That is the only way in which we have an understanding of how revolutionary politics can function.
I predicted something.
All right, and then your advocacy talks about you say that on your framework you say that slavery was the result only of colonialism, and that individuals are functionally. You talk about how they're forced to be commodity-producing countries, right?
Right.
And that's only a result of colonialism.
Not that it's only a result of colonialism, right? Eurocentrism had lots of influence on the way in which colonialism operated, but we say that neoliberalism was the way in which those things were ideologically justified.
Okay, yeah, we have 5 seconds.
Okay, the order is 1
It is criticism, so we have to go.
Just so you all know, I didn't notice any particular breaks in my first 2 pages, but I have on the case lead, so I got just everything straight in.
So is the framework on a separate sheet, or
The
is it?
framework was signified to me on a separate sheet.
Yeah, I have the rest of it on one sheet.
I have it all.
Is that what you guys have?
And I have the rest of it on 2 sheets. So, complicating everything, I'm going to put everything that he says straight down.
That's how we think.
My preference would realistically be on the rest of it, and then in the immediate, you either go top to bottom or bottom to top. It's going to be hard to do. It would be hard to do.
We'll make it just
straight down to the
linearly down.
So you said 1 off and then straight down the alphabet?
Make sure your super low acoustics suck. So.
Yes. Tell me if I'm not. Okay. First is the framework. What is the role of about? The role of about is to vote for the team who best interrogates the politics of borders. Again, the role of about is to vote for the team who best interrogates the politics of borders. Some point is that this is how we relate to each other by creating our artificial difference by over the border. The idea of the border is ultimately substantiated and constructed by the human to indicate that there's difference here. The idea that we can bring these things down because we put them in place. In the first place, the little B argument is interrogation is ultimately the way that we are able to solve. Otherwise, we will always already predispose to borders, just like the affirmative doesn't predispose to borders. We will only think that there are something that has to exist. Always, which is not that we have to interrogate those types of other things that are happening in the subsequent next term is that methodology has converted to make it a question of methodology, just a question of competing methods, which means that we have the methods to be solved 100% the affirmative that you go negative the next term is that you will First argument is their historical analysis ultimately leads out the idea of borders ultimately being interrogated, which will allow them to come up with which means that there's no ability, which means that there's no ability for them to be able to resolve. The second link is that they are recognizing the old colony of Britain industry instantiates historically reinstantiates the borders that have ultimately been utilized for border. They reinstantiate by recognizing Mali land. In the future, would ultimately cause reinstantiation of old British colonialism with one means it turns 100% the case, but also means that you can link to the criticism. The second argument is that the recognition of an independent country of quote Somaliland even exists at all. The idea that would even exist at all other than borders would recreate new ones of recognition of borders you recognizing the borders of the state, not the people of the state, which means that you would always think that the border reinstitution of the border. The second or the third argument is that the independence of the nation state, the idea that anything can be independent from another on the geopolitical plane is the idea that the borders can ultimately be inevitably sustained by the other. Next argument is that they tie the identity to the border. Look at the way the rhetorical choices that they make in the BMC. They say that they speak different languages, they do different things, which means their identity is tied to their geographical location, which reduces the value of life to zero, which is an impact. Which is an impact as well as the link argument. The next argument is they also create a new border. They also create a new border by reinstating an old one, which means that they will always link to the criticism, but also means that they do not. They do resolve the impacts. First argument, borders make nationalism inevitable, which ultimately feeds racism, which is the indication that we live at one point on the border. We'll always say that the otherization happens on the other point, which is exactly how racism ultimately begins about the strict value life of these individuals, which means that we always make disposable populations ultimately happen. The second argument is that borders are only created are only value, the only value that they give individuals. So based on borders, they say that these individuals are valueless because their borders not the force in the status quo, which is exactly why this leads to the impact that they only view people through the lens of borders, which means that these people are disposable. The next argument is that causes an ongoing wars. The reason why resource conflicts and all these different things happen is because we reinstate the borders. We say that when something is on our border, you have to trade with us, or else we're not going to give it to you at all. That is internally to 100%. That's the next argument is that the short space one is the physical manifestation of differences of border, which means that we would always say that you create a new difference that ultimately occurs, which means you won't be able to resolve the FOB because the smaller nations will also be able to do this as well. Just looking at colonialism does not actually critique the way the borders ultimately cause. Also the fact that smaller nations can also do instantiate borders is not critiqued by the affirmative, which means that they always choose case the next argument is different countries with different resources. We've already explained above why we would also ultimately turn the African resources as well, because the only reason that we predispose that resources are ours because borders also we would say that this is for causing international political issues and new colonialism itself, because the fact that we cause colonialism through the fact that we feel that we need to recognize borders, we need to colonize something that they can hang in, literally be our two borders that we will agree to. Also, we would say the refugee crisis will be covered up with the one borders are instantiated because we use this as discussion as justification to be able to we use this as justification in order to make sure that refugees cannot come across borders. Also, we would think that this is the only reason that their need crisis even happen in the status quo is because the fact that we say that we are a different country, which means that we would have to get in the first place that predisposes that there's a border between the two, which means that the internal link to that, which means that alternative. Vote negative to destabilize the border politics of the PMC. Again, vote negative. Destabilize the border politics of the PMC. Solvency. First argument is that instability is ultimately going to be key. This is the way the borders are propped up in the sense of like creating the stable. Or with the borders, the only ability to hear that is to be able to show that they're unstable. The next argument, cultural diaspora across cultural flows is post-alternative, which ultimately happens, which means the border is not necessarily whatsoever. We created the border, which means that it's just likely that we compare it. Also, emotional movement indicates that there's a global village and can ultimately be embraced. We destroy the idea of borders. Second argument is endorsement grants legitimacy of our action, which means that destabilizing borders on the individual level allows for us to destabilize them overall. Next argument, you don't get a permutation. One is that you establish a border politic that always reinforces it because that is a successful of how we predispose things, which means that if the affirmative predispose borders, it will always do that with the permutations will also secondary footnote 100% of the alternative, because it would say that borders must come before this because that is how the international politics work. That's what which means that it should always be preferred. Face straight up. First argument, you say that the EU is neocolonialism. The second argument, our argument is that this is the root cause of argument the borders are the reason why things like neocolonialism only happen because we try to enforce our borders and also apply to colonize other borders, which means that this is the internal link. If we did not have borders, we wouldn't have these problems. Also, you say foreign aid, we say that the borders are the reason why foreign aid ultimately happens, and also the reason why we feel like the West can have beholden to other states because we ultimately secure resources within our borders, which is exactly why we are the response to this. You say neoliberalism equals state dependence. Our argument is that without borders, we would not have the type of neoliberalism because there would not be an ability for us to say that some resources are ultimately ours, which means that you can't have those which props up. Economic system means that we'd be able to resolve 100% of that. Next argument, you say that the area of coloniality is ultimately commodifying. Here's interesting one, you don't resolve this whatsoever by just interrogating the history behind this one border. Doesn't mean that just like interrogating the history behind this one action does not actually make sure that all coloniality goes down. The next argument is turn. You also reinstantiate a border from the British colony, which means you reinstantiate a new a form of coloniality, which means that will lead to your bound cross-examination, where you say that this would ultimately lead to small alien recognition, which means you lead to the recognition or border the next terminology impacts of our storm. You say the desire for resource and exploitation sustainability. One is that we all desire resources is an inevitable interesting question, whether or not we feel like we have to keep those resources for ourselves or not, which is what we would resolve. You say the resource was what we have, and I think we're pretty good root cause analysis is why we would resolve that also. We would say that you lead to new resource or renew resource wars by instantiating an old border. You will always lead to new resource wars as the country feels as if they have access to these resources because they have a border. The next one is that you also said that they would launch nuclear weapons, all these things. We're winning arguments. This is why say this borders will always create the types of problems. Next argument, you say they can modify individuals. We would indicate that you can modify the individual, which is a turn, because the fact that you indicate that they're only linked to their border, otherwise they have no value, which means that you would always link to these problems. Next argument is all the alternative solving.
Or the,
Their advocacy.
yeah.
First one is that historicism is never going to be able to resolve because one, there's unwritten history, which means that you would never be able to tell all of history. On your side, which means that it's impossible to be able to do this. Second argument is that if you believe that the history is a good method of solving, the alternative is you will think that us as they don't even interrogate where Somaliland came from in the first place, which means that they would never be able to meet this. Next argument is that they always presume that borders are inevitable. They say that in their solvency, it's critical to be able to question why we presume colonialism. But the real question here is why we presume that borders happen in the first place. We are already getting to that first. Next argument is this is not a good role about whatsoever to criticize modes of coloniality. Be able to resolve the criticism, nor is it actually a good rule about because there's no ability for us to be able to criticize modes of coloniality when we reinforce them through the alternative by saying that we should interrogate these historical forces and lead to the recognition of Somalia. The next argument is that you say that you say that populations we need to fight to be recognized and they're writing this in the cycle. Our argument is that the only reason that these things happen in the status quo is because we reinstantiate borders, which means that it's key to their culture. Also, your arguments about linguistic domination, all these different things are just instantiations of why you think value is linked to the border, which is only that you say that the battle of choice we indicate that you would the end of this debate is ultimately critical. What is the cost of this debate and what method is going to be able to resolve this? You have no method to be able to resolve 100% of this because you don't even do a historical analysis of these things. I would hold this very suspect to be able to do this. If anything, you do not even recognize other forms of history because those who are not colonialists, i.e. those who lost, will not be written in the history, which means you lead to the exclusion of those types of history, which means you always lose.
Okay, so I'd just like to walk through a brief history of the era of the colonization on the continent of Africa because I want to know what came first, the artificial borders imposed by the Europeans or like their colonial intentions. So
We
like,
contend that the borders that came first. You had to have a European nation and Eurocentrism first before they decided that they were going to colonize other nations. You even
So the
say
fact
that.
that those,
Say
like,
Eurocentrism
so let me ask you this, is like European culture like universal? Like do all European countries and culture?
No, but
all the same?
Eurocentrism is a thing. It is the thing that idea that the West is the best or that the global North is the best, which is
Sure,
based
I
on
understand
borders
Eurocentrism
and
is
the
a
concepts
thing.
of
I understand
borders.
Eurocentrism is a thing. But are all those cultures the same? Like is Spain the same as Britain?
No, but our argument is that you're tying their cultural identity to the land, and that doesn't have to be true. Cultural flows exist and exist in borders.
How does the 1AC tie cultural identity to the land?
Your rhetoric, I mean, look at what you're talking about. You're like, oh, they speak a different language, so we should create a border.
No, they speak a different language as a result of
Well, you do also say, regardless of that, you say that, yeah, Somaliland thinks that they are an independent nation, which is a link to the criticism, but you additionally defend the fact that Somaliland is, you talked about how it was created.
So should we have like a global government, just like one state?
We're saying that borders are like states.
We say that
So we should get rid of borders.
What?
Was it true, like, does your
No, we shouldn't have borders. No, we should not have borders. Yes, that's our argument. You can do what you want with that.
okay, so let's go for 20 seconds.
Oh, sorry.
right, yeah.
I thought you were talking about that.
Okay, so how does the alt solve the act?
The alternative solves through cause of the affirmative. Our argument is that border politics are the reason as to how Eurocentrism justified that they had the better resources they had, and they could colonize countries that only were seen as commodity-producing nations.
So let me ask you this: why does neoliberalism like borders?
What?
Because
Why
the
is
only
that?
reason why neoliberalism and economic capitalism and different things like this is because we created borders to have resources that were quote our own that we wouldn't give to people. There's no necessity for that post the word politics.
F, straight down, then the alternative, the framework, the links and the impact. Okay. We'll go with
You just be like really loud. I hate you very
Because there's obviously universalized agreement on how to show criticism. I have it all on one page.
Okay.
And I'll,
It was the history down the last. Right.
I'll remember that.
That's just for me.
No, yeah. I'll sign this.
Alright, is everybody ready?
On the one hand, you say borders are the root cause of colonialism. This is laughable. Colonialism is the root cause of borders, which is why when the European nations went into Africa, this is why they drew the artificial borders. That is the root cause of borders against colonialism. Our articulations that neocolonialism is what is structuring the borders of Africa within the status quo and is what is preventing them from engaging in probably a more regional arrangement where they don't necessarily have borders. But neocolonialism is what is preventing the identification of Somaliland is necessarily different, which means we are always going to be the prior question is that colonialism controls the imposition of borders. But this is but you said that we would necessarily securitize inside our borders. Our reputation is that we are able to ultimately check back against this because securitization is happening in the status quo because of neocolonialism. Our reputation is that the great powers are securitizing against these individuals, and that only in the world where we are able to solve back for this, that we are able to solve back for all forms of securitization. Yes?
Corporations don't have borders, but they still secure.
Yeah, corporations don't have borders, but they're ultimately able to securitize. But additionally, the next argument, you say without borders, there are no neoliberalism. This argument flips the other way. Without borders, neoliberalism returns rampant because in turn you just allow the world to become a massive free trade agreement where there are no borders. It's just all one massive economy. That is absolutely devastating because that allows neoliberalism to be able to run rampant and both absent borders and to be able to run unchecked. But additionally, the next argument is that colonialism doesn't solve Eurocentrism. We don't claim to solve Eurocentrism. We just claim to be a good method as a way to solve neocolonialism. That means that's all we have to do. But additionally, the next argument you say that we reify British border. This is a laughable argument. You obviously didn't do topic research considering that Somaliland and committing that Somaliland Act asking for independence from Somalia in 1980 after the British borders were imposed in like the 40s, which means that this was an entirely new border. It was a border that was left all up entirely to the country of Somaliland, which is an indication that this isn't a return to a colonial border. But additionally, the next argument is that you said that we would always necessarily design a resource, but our reputation is that neocolonialism necessitates the accumulation of resources, but is really going to make those resource wars inevitable because when the U.S. has a lot of resources and China doesn't, that would give China the impetus to be able to tag. But you said that we would cause new resource wars, but our reputation is that you would cause new resource wars because the lack of a border would mean endless free trade agreements, which means that there's just endless amounts of wars because those people would have legitimate claims to those resources because they would say it would be inside their territory because the entire territory would be the entire earth. But additionally, the next argument you say nuclear weapons and then you would commodify the what?
Also, intellectual property rights were not established as a result of borders. Those are for corporations to own things, not for states.
Yeah, intellectual property rights are not a result of borders, but that's a result of necessarily neoliberalism so that corporations can own states. Your argumentation about commodification and nuclear weapons, we group both of those. We're ultimately able to solve the impetus that nuclear weapons would get used within the status quo because that is the only countries relegated to periphery countries that are being just satellite countries that are feeding the neocolonial power and have weapons against them. But additionally, the next argument you said that historicism isn't able to solve, but our reputation is that historicism is ultimately necessary to solve. We have to identify and figure out the ways in which neocolonialism can ultimately be able to co-opt us as well as so that we can circumvent it. But this is the next argument you said that history is a good method that you were able to solve, but you don't even know the fucking history of this resolution considering that you said this would be a return to British borders and Somaliland declared independence in 1982. You said that you would reinstate borders of linguistic determination. Our argumentation is that that is criticism of why neocolonialism is essentializing that there are these linguistic differences, but they're considered one homogeneous nation. We're not talking about borders, but additionally that's it. That's all I have. You can extend across the framework that the role of the ballot is to interrogate the production and maintenance of colonial power. Our reputation is that this is ultimately going to be a prior question to the framework of the criticism because we are able to find it, we are able to interrogate the ways in which borders interact when we are able to interrogate coloniality because we won that coloniality is necessarily a prior question to the imposition of borders and the way that borders operate. Sure, you might win that borders external of the way that the 20th fucking century happened is perhaps something that we can interrogate, but borders as the theory of the squo operates because of neocolonial and colonial impositions. Yes.
Also, their theory is ahistorical. That allows people to construct borders as being benign.
Yeah, that is their history. Their history is ahistorical, which means that people construct history as necessarily being benign. But I want you to extend across the thing necessarily result in the extinction. You may have answered resource wars, but you have not answered the fact that this would ultimately lead to environmental destruction as well as the commodification. We're not going to go to the commodification terms. You would just lead to the extinction of everybody through the destruction of the environment because that's what neoliberalism necessitates. But additionally, the next lecture is going to be on the alternative permutation. Vote affirmative to destabilize border politics. Vote affirmative to destabilize border politics. A couple of soft arguments first is that obviously we don't reunify borders. We made arguments that's why neocolonial interrogation is able to ultimately solve. But then additionally, the next argument, the benefit to the permutation, that we can combine the methodology of the PNC, which we say is critical to interrogating the historical genealogical investigation, which actually gets to the root cause of why borders are ultimately imposed, which means that even if you win an argument that we would necessarily impose borders, that the permutation would allow us to dissolve those borders while actually interrogating why those were able to be imposed. But additionally, the next argument is that the alternative doesn't solve the PMC because you don't interrogate why borders happen in the first place, which is the neo-colonial imposition. But additionally, the next argumentation is going to be that the first argument that the Perm solves that the most paradoxical deconstruction of borders around the alternative is between the alternative and the app. And the next argument that you said that individual destabilization of borders is good, then this makes them justify the concept of
Make them justify the concept of mutual exclusivity as opposed to borders.
yeah, make them justify the concept of mutual exclusivity as opposed to the term of borders. But additionally, the third argument is that the ultimate solve the app because border focus and only destabilizing that politic leads to neoliberal cosmopolitanism, whereby the neoliberal just says that this is one massive territory for us to be able to take over. The fourth argument is going to be the autonomy. Is that the eighth point is that the obsession with the individual focus gets co-opted by its neoliberal ideology as a celebration of the freedom that justifies corporations and anti-regulation. The beast point is that this turns the alternative because neoliberalism will what? Not what? Not love borders. Because neocolonialism will not love borders. Is that all you want to do?
Yeah, go to the framework.
Go to the framework. The first argument, they say that borders are necessarily a prior question, but we can necessarily that the interrogation of neocolonialism and neoliberalism is a prior question. In order to be able to determine this, I've already made arguments as to why the 20th century formulated the ways in which borders function now, which means that that is inherent. You cannot discuss borders without a discussion of colonialism and neocolonialism in the contemporary, which means we are always a prior question, or at least on parity. But additionally, you say methodology first. We are a methodology when we access this with our genealogical, historical, and events interrogation. But additionally, the next that's all I've got for you.
Yeah, go.
But additionally, the next argument on the links. The first argument is going to be the turn of what is his critique of colonial redrawing is because it is because what? Huh? What?
The one you see critique.
Yeah, the one I see critiques colonialism and critiques the ways in which colonialism has ordered motions, but additionally ordered borders. But additionally, the second argument is going to be the turn that Somaliland self-determination is a redrawing of colonial borders, which means we're literally linterned this. But additionally, the next argument is that the next argument is going to be the turn that difference recognition is only good. That good strategy that trying to say that all populations are the same is efficiency of smooth space that allows for neo-colonial corporations to be able to neoliberal corporations to be able to come over and take over everything. But additionally, the next argument.
The one you see criticizes the way in which we drew borders to be able to destabilize those populations by reserving rights like IPR for the West.
Yeah, we reserve rights for the IPR to the West, and the PMC is critical to be able to interrogate the ways in which borders function to contemporary politics and the ways that we exclude those nations in the periphery. But additionally, the next argument is that you say that it's key to the identity of the borders, but our argumentation is, what is that?
Identity is good. You can't say that nobody is ever different.
Yeah, identity is good. You can't say that nobody is ever different, but then I want you to go to the impacts. You say that borders makes nationalism possible, but our argumentation is that nationalism is possible even without borders. Nationalism is possible. You can just say that you identify with this local group of individuals, but additionally, you say that disposable populations, and you say that terms and physical manifestations. But our argumentation is that that is the status quo. The status quo is disposable populations, and the status quo is all of these things. That these groups exist in part of the status quo because neocolonialism makes it possible for these groups to be disposed of. Because look, if Dutch Royal Shell can go into Nigeria and say that we're going to build enclave capitalism, put all of those people that live in that country there just so that they can produce oil, so that they can then in turn die, and then that's just an endless cycle. That is the status quo. We are critical of solving back for that.
So when you said that you flowed it straight down, did you mean you just flowed it you didn't go down the all?
I think it's hard just on the river and everything that you said.
I was gonna go with that. So
So just to be making the same
okay. So no. The order is the criticism in the same order as the MG. Which is all of the framework, the links, the impacts. Then the app.
All framework.
It's the same order they put in, all framework, links, impacts, and then the app. Is everybody ready? Go. On the alternative, the first argument against the permutation that you've considered on the 6 that just had a permutation that you were just reiterating the board politics of the PMC, which means people never even solve it. Reasons you reject permutation. Additionally, second also number 7, I just had the other permutation as well, which is unique. Reasons to reject it as well, which is that you were footnoting the alternative, which means that you always posit that you should allow board politics in this one instance, which allows for it to instantly repeat itself in the future, which allows for it to prevent anything solved for the alternative. Additionally, the actual you say you don't verify borders not true. You literally talk about it and choose to say you are a different type of border than colonialism. That you are still redefining the concept of the border. back to history. We provide method or ways to solve that, which means even regardless of the history of the PNC or the status quo, we at least provide method or ways to interrogate that, but also I think our discussion the links page allows for discussion of history as well, especially within the debate space. We are engaging in interrogation of how history is informed borders. For example, we talk about things such as Eurocentrism, both the cross-sex and the LC, and how Eurocentrism allowed the concept of the global north to believe that its border was better than the global south, which allowed for the justification of colonialism. And in the first place section, you say, that you would destroy borders, that we destroy the border between the PNC and the NAG. First of all, you are completing our argument. We do not say just borders in general. The difference between you and I are talking about geographical borders and defense of such borders. This is a completion of our argument and bastardization of it as such. This is not our argument. This doesn't make any sense. And you say we have to justify exclusivity of borders. Not true. Our argument is that just there could be a difference between you and I. That's all going to happen. It's a question of the way that we identify our identity in borders and the way that we use borders to justify things such as neocolonialism and neoliberalism. Actually, we see the permutation team solve back for neoliberalism. A couple responses here. The first response is the permutation can never solve back for neoliberalism because you use the border politics which allows for neoliberalism to exist in the first place, which allows for our country to say this land is mine, which means that this land is mine, which means that resources are mine to trade. This is a reason why it's bad because we talked about this in the LLC as to how it was the West and specifically Europe in general deciding, many European countries deciding that they had the technology to use the commodity producing nations such as those in Africa, which is why they decided to colonize them because they saw the tied their resources and their identity tied to their borders. And it's just reasons to why you do not ever solve it. We are capable of solving neoliberalism because more later next we say that autonomy is co-opted and we are co-opted for neoliberalism. No, solving neoliberalism remains fragmented multiple times. Problem is how we are able to solve neoliberalism because we look at the way the resources are trying to land. Even corporations and private industries did not exist before the nation state and individual society. The territories were declared by the there are no territories like this. It means this does not happen. There would just be free trading. No one would decide that these resources are better than yours because you must pay money for them. And I would just provide you whatever you need. You provide me what I need because it means that neoliberalism is a madness and it's just a pure form of free trade which no one is taking advantage of. It would just be trade to survive framework. You say Neil calls prior question already answered this argument multiple times and flows how we solve the root cause of neocolonialism. Additionally, you said in the 20th century, you're 20, you said you don't know history. First of all, it doesn't matter. We talk about history with an alternative. We provide the best method to solve back the history of neocolonialism. And we also do talk about the history. We talk about Europe and Eurocentrism, the concept of the nation state was allowed for us to determine that another nation state was less than us and allowed for us to draw the borders to determine which resources we can get access to. Additionally, you say the method comes first. That's fine. This doesn't matter. We said that you have to interrogate borders first because they are what informs difference through things such as nationalism, etc. And the PNC is predisposed to this existence first, which is why you should look at all claims. You say you redraw colonialism and solve first one. No, you do not solve whenever you allow for a new form. What?
Also, redrawing is the link.
The next one is also redrawing is the link. This is the reason why you were creating a new form. I was going to say that. This is why you are causing a new form of border because you decide that some borders are okay, but some borders are okay. You're allowing for any borders to exist at all. It's infinitely regressive. It means that all borders can be justified in some fashion, form or fashion, which means this means that you will never fall back to the criticism. But additionally, you say it's an only land. It's just rejoining old borders. First of all, you conceded our argument doesn't matter about these links, about the way this one land was created. You still like tie identity to geographical location. You still advocate for the independence of a nation based on its borders. But additionally, you say that different recognition is good. No, yes, people can have different types of cultures, but this is not a reason as to why you should compare your culture only to your country. For example, Somaliland is these individual identities tied only to the land of Somaliland. We think that is uniquely bad. The fact that they can only have agency if they are recognized independence or that they have to be recognized as a nation is bad. And you say we ignore populations that are taken over by neoliberalism. No, that is not true. A, you told that because you do not interrogate overall issues of neocolonialism, such as the concept of property rights and property based on borders. Additionally, you say the PNC is interrogating border politics. No, you don't do that. You say identity is good. We don't say identity is bad. We just say the way that tying identity to geographical location is bad. Send across the arguments that you create a new form of border. This is number 6 and 7 arguments also. Number 5 argument that you're independent of the nation state and you recognize state. Impacts. You said nationalism exists without borders. That doesn't matter. We're still able to solve the risk of this. And additionally, we have reasons why the root cause of your affirmative because of the ongoing war, which means that we can still solve for neocolonialism. We don't even need nationalism arguments. Additionally, we would contend that nationalism is only able to be used in bad ways because we say that we are, for example, the United States, and we can do anything to anyone else. It's such informed states of patriotism, etc. What's your question, quickly?
Yeah, so like, what would nationalism look like in a world that...
We wouldn't have nationalism in the world, we didn't have the nation state, we would just be individual cultures, such as, like, we're all, like, whatever culture you have, it doesn't have to be tied to the nation. We say you solve the source of population through, you call or answer this, but you don't know the case. You say corporations wins, you don't solve. First of all, not true. It is a question of the property rights were created by the nation state to determine this. Resources are mine so that I can choose to trade them, etc. This is a securitization of resources by the nation state. This is what allowed private corporations to take advantage of this. If we were to eliminate this, this would mean we solve the number 6 argument one that you make is that you create a new border. Yes, it's the criticism. Also, reason why you don't solve it because you just allow for new forms of neocolonialism to currently perpetuate themselves in the future. You paint a form of a border and now I allows for it to continuously exist in the future. Then you say that you'll call these resource wars again. You can explain that we solve this through things like IPR were created based on territories and based on individuals in one country to say these are my patents, these are my rights. You cannot take them. It's still based on identity and based on the concept of or identity to order, etc. The next argument I want on advocacy is that you do not answer argument that there are unwritten forms of history, which means that you're unable to solve. We are able to solve the cause of your affirmative by interrogating the history through our discussion, but additionally providing a method to resolve, which means we solve all of your impacts, including things like environmental destruction.
The LR will just be on one you shoot. It'll be like a giant. Everybody good?
Washburn has won this debate because we are the only ones with a method that resolves both the impacts of the criticism and the impacts of the affirmative. They reinstantiated an old border that was created by Britain. You are just wrong on the history. The history is that Britain created a border and then they were out and then the African nations were there, but then the Somali wants the independence based on the borders that were drawn by Britain. That is our argument, that they colonized that and then they link their identity to those borders, which is why we resolve those questions. Like, we are right here. At the end of the debate, you have to ask yourself what the best method is going to be at the end. They say historically, interrogate small land. They don't even do this in the affirmative whatsoever. There is no historical analysis in the affirmative. There is no historical analysis that comes out. The only historical analysis is their response to our historical analysis, which means that there's no solvency for the alternative, for the advocacy that they have whatsoever. Also, be excessive for cause of why these things are even existing in the sense for the reason why you try to get into the border, reason why all of these things happen in the sense where they say that they will try to run others root cause arguments that says that colonialism came first. Does that even make sense? Their argument is that neocolonialism came first because Britain, borders, decided to make new borders colonialism. That doesn't make sense. Britain decided to do this based on the borders they created for themselves first, which is why we will be winning the root cause argument. At the end of the debate, the impacts that they have are resource wars, nuclear weapon, the extension of life, and the quantity of individuals. These are all solved by the alternative. They are not solved by the affirmative on probability. First thing that you have to evaluate is their method. Their method is ultimately bad. One is that they don't historically interrogate whatsoever. They can say all the reasons why historical interrogation would be good, but they don't do this in the PMC, which means that there's no ability, also no bright line why they would be able to resolve this. Also, little b is that they link to new borders here, the redrawing, and the reinstitution of those small land borders are ultimately going to be a bad thing, which means that they've already lost this because they don't even meet the burden that they have in their arguments. You also can see that some history will always be left out, which means that historicism as a method has an independent dissent that we do not have to argue. The fact that they leave out certain forms of history, the fact that they leave those unspoken questions, which means you would always prefer the negative on this question. The second argument that you have to evaluate is our method. Our method is going to be able to resolve this. We don't need them. You don't need the permutation to be able to resolve the affirmative, which is the reason why you would never vote for it. Also, any link is ultimately a dissent to the same. Also, we also say that we would be able to resolve all the impacts. The reason why these things happen, the reason why neocolonialism happened, the reason why resource conflicts happen is because we reinstantiate borders and decide what is theirs and what is ours. This construction of borders ultimately causes these types of impacts to be inevitable, which means that if there's a risk that they reinstantiate new borders by causing small land to ultimately be able to enforce their borders, and there's a risk that they ultimately cause their impacts to be inevitable, which means you always would vote for the negative. The next argument is on the permutation that you have to evaluate. First, they have already conceded all of our independent dissents of the permutation that came out of the LLC through voting, which means that they will always their voices, the borders will always be louder than the voices that are going against borders, which means that they would always lose. Also, they reinsert into border politics of the PM. So also, you do not need the permutation. The only reason why you would need the permutation is that the affirmative was able to resolve what it is, because we have the better method, which means you would never vote for this. Also, they reinsert the border politics and poison 100% of this because they would always say the borders are something that is necessarily always predisposed. Somali land deserves borders, all these different things would cause the permutation to inevitably fail. Magnitude.
There are a few questions that they're going to ask about the end of this debate. One is that will cultural groups still exist? And two is that businesses are still going to get as close as one. Is that the cultural groups argument? We know the reason why cultural groupism is bad in the status quo is because of borders. That is our argument. That because we say that some borders are ultimately there, you can still have your culture, you can still be able to identify with a group. It doesn't mean you are militantly using the borders to be able to enforce bad things happen. But the second argument is on the businesses. One is that we solve the root cause. Pure free trade would be able to resolve this, but also this try for the alternative because they have no method to resolve businesses. They have no method to resolve that. There is no historical interrogation of Somaliland resolves some weird neocolonialism thing. No reason why that resolves anything at all. You also concede that we are the root cause of neocolonialism, which means it's happened also. You root cause of neocolonialism, you also concede things like refugees that ultimately have to post this, also things like resource wars that ultimately are inevitable. These are tiebreakers. Because they're never going to be able to solve this, especially on the refugees, which is still population flows negative. Also, you have conceded that once we resolve 100% of the admin, that we're ready the root cause of the debate to the admin, we should always win on this argument. At the end of the day, it is a question of method. Their method does nothing for you. The PMC does not even meet their own advocacy, which means that you would never vote for them, never vote for the permutation. You will always vote for risk that the alternative results in.
Look at the app. With an overview, obviously. And then the criticism. And the link debate, and then all debate plus unopposed arguments and delivery.
Can you say that again?
Overview, affirmative, link debate, all debate, I will second. Is everybody good?
The LLC is a lot of hot water without a border. The ace of point is that the question of this debate is why does Somaliland not get recognized as a state in the international community? You have conceded that neoliberalism operates with the assumption of a fantasy of a smooth space that allows it to be able to occupy the entire globe, and an asymmetrical analysis allows you to be able to paint neoliberalism as benign. That's why the U2NC talks about this bullshit about how all of a sudden we'll be able to trade and no one will be exploited, except for you conceded that intellectual property rights are being constructed in order to give corporate domination in the West the ultimate amount of power to be able to determine who gets access to those resources and who does not, and that or export-oriented approaches will still exist. Post-alternative means that you have no risk of insolvency for the piece point that there are big ideological justifications about the concept of the border and the concept of the space don't make any goddamn sense and refuse to allow for analysis of the way in which the state has operated as a tool of neoliberal corporations. Why does the state do the things that they do? The 2NC has no answer to this argument, absent some vague justifications that borders allow us to do these things. Neoliberalism justifies the policies that resulted in neocolonialism in the first place. You have conceded all of this analysis case. Extended across the argument indicates that neoliberalism and neoliberal colonialism would cause the borders because of the ways in which those intellectual property rights are given to the West is by drawing those borders as a result of the need to have resource acquisition. That means that the justification or the reason of the app is the acquisition of resources. That's been the story since Jump Street. The next argument is that you say that there will be new resource wars or new forms of neocolonialism. We have not made a particular articulation of why historical interrogation of the neocolonial cast, so specifically the way why Somaliland doesn't get recognized as a state in the status quo leads to new forms. You just say we redraw borders. I don't understand why the permutation doesn't overcome all of this shit. If we destabilize the border politic of the 1AC and also interrogate the neoliberal ways in which the history has functioned to form a politic of the status quo. Now, go to the criticism links first. The first argument I want is that the 1AC was a criticism of the way in which colonial borders was drawn, and that the 1AC's advocacy that allows for Somaliland to be recognized as independent, regardless of what the international community thinks of what an independent state actually looks like, is a necessary criticism to be able to resolve all of your link arguments. You have conceded that the 1AC begins from the perspective where you historically analyze the way in which politics are situated right now. You have simply assert that the 1AC did not perform history. What the hell are you talking about? Literally, the advocacy is historical interrogation, and all we ever talked about was the way in which these politics are situated by colonial histories, which means that there's not a possibility for you to be able to garner a link argument of the fact that we redraw, even if that's true, is a vague ideological justification that destabilizing would necessarily solve. The next argument I want is also to stir and extend across the argument that indicates that there has to be a recognition of difference. You say that different cultures can be recognized, but then right above this you also make the argument that border concepts are infinitely regressive, which means that one of two things is true. Either the distinction between me and Stephen and Caitlin and also the alt and the app can be infinitely regressed to be able to justify an infinite number of borders, like the borders between freaking molecules, and that means that your impact is ultimately inevitable, then there's not ability for you to be able to solve, but we say that recognizing. Yeah, sure.
Right, I feel like you are massively expanding on the MG argument, making new claims such as things specifically you're sentence that borders are inevitable because like we can have borders between molecules and stuff like that.
Check it. You made this analysis in the 2 and C, and that's why you said borders are infinitely regressive, which is why redrawing is a link that leads to new borders. This is your first answer on the link debate, which means that if borders are infinitely regressive, this is also our argument on the alternative that I'm about to get to, is that you have not justified the concept of mutual exclusivity. It means that like this is the argument from Jump Street that
It's not in the MG because it's in the NO.
yeah.
Okay, what's it?
I'm sure it's under consideration. I'm still on the page.
Okay.
Recognizing this difference is good, you consider the argument the only way to be able to solve for neoliberalism imposition of a smooth space to be able to dominate populations is by recognizing that cultures are different and not all of them are neoliberal, i.e. some multi-man in the status quo. Why have they not been recognized? Because neoliberalism wants them to be pliant and they fucking aren't. It's an indication that none of your arguments are actually applied in the way one is operates. Permutation debate. Extended cost of permutation, vote for to destabilize border politics with the money. So you consider that a historical analysis is necessarily critical of this. I will go for two dissents of the alternative. The ace points that the ahistorical nature of your advocacy does not necessitate any kind of historical analysis. You just vaguely reference, oh, we talked about Britain and some shit, but you never actually said why these things exist, what ideological justifications were used to create and establish intellectual property rights that are only given to the West in order to make sure that when we develop resources, they're given to Eurocentric countries. Means the affirmative is necessarily critical to be included in your alternative, because otherwise people can construct borders as benign and neoliberalism as benign and try and form these new forms of trading when you conceded that monopolization of the status quo means that power is always fostered there. Now I want the dissent that says that you would be cooperated by neoliberalism because of your discourses of individual autonomy of the population and focus on things that are not states. Your argument that we should have the freedom to be able to question why borders draw differences between populations will be co-opted by neoliberal impositions of the notion of Western conceptualizations of legal structures that allows them to be able to say that autonomy is the ultimate thing. That means that corporate personhood and other legal structures that have been exported to the continent of Africa allows for a smooth space for corporations to have. And you can see that turns the alternative. Your only responses to that is that we would not get co-opted because we allow for a questioning of border politics. We say that border politics is critical to be able to check back for neoliberalism in some instances, such as in Somaliland, but the ability for the permutation to destabilize the way in which border politics have historically operated is sufficient. Look, the only dissent is like footnoting. I think that means that you can't solve the app if that is true, and neoliberalism outweighs because the impact on
No, there is no answer to footnoting in the EMG. It came out with the LOC, was Brian's last argument on the alternative. It was a dissent to permutation. I was just extending it in
it's calculation. I'm literally weighing our dissents of the alt versus their net benefits of permutation. Like the net benefits of permutation versus their dissent of the perm. That's it. I didn't say there was an answer, but I just said that the neoliberal qualification of the alt is a like net benefit of the perm that outweighs the dissent of the perm. Cool?
Last argument I use the extension of the impact neoliberalism allows for quantification of only individuals that allows for individual life to be pliant and populations become disposable in the end world because they're only ever evaluated as long as they are predicted. That is a dissent to the alternative. You are not able to solve it because the only reason that neoliberalism can operate is via smooth space. They are a fantasy of cosmopolitan neoliberal trade. The affirmative is critical to solve.